Complementary Foods lecture. Last time we had talked about, we finished talking about key nutrients and we discussed fats. We discussed omega-6, omega-3 fats and good food sources for kids so that they could get healthful sources of fats. And then the next section is on when and what to feed. So as you can see, here's Miss Thornton feeding one of her daughters. And this is my youngest grandson. This is his first foods. I actually show this because, but you can tell by looking at this face that he may not like the food or he's nonplussed. And infants oftentimes look this way. Parents see this kind of face and think, well, they don't like peas or they don't like this. But it doesn't mean anything. It means that they're having a lot of stimulation. And studies show that in order to help infants learn to like new foods, then you offer them several times. So if they don't like peas the first time, you offer it again and you offer it again, and maybe even up to 15 times on different occasions. And then they'll slowly start to accept food. So that face is pretty normal. Okay, so a little bit about bottle feeding. And for the purposes of the exam, I will ask questions about how many ounces per feeding and so forth, but I give you this information so you know that it exists. So if you're working with clients, you'd be able to give them advice about how much infants are consuming, and this helps when parents or caregivers are making a bottle, then they know how much to make up, right? It's important that an infant, once a bottle touches an infant's lips, then the infant should consume what they want at that time. And if they don't finish the bottle, which they very well may not, then you put the bottle down and you throw it away. You never put it back in the refrigerator, bring it up later, because it's a perfect medium for bacteria to grow, especially when it's touched their mouth. So you want to try to make about the right amount so you don't waste. Never pressure an infant to finish the bottle. Remember, paced feeding is a way to feed infants where you hold them up a little bit and allow the feeding process to be slow and let the infants be in charge of how much they consume. And don't use large bottles. Don't fill up a bottle with 8 ounces and try to finish it. And also never have anything else in the bottle. Sometimes parents or caregivers think that adding cereal to the bottle will help an infant get sleepy or be full longer, and no research supports that. And also cereal in a bottle can be a choking hazard. Finally, nothing in the bottle, no juices or sweetened beverages. Now, how do I know when infants should be introduced? The standard is around 6 months, and up until this time, they've consumed only breast milk or formula. So what is it about 6 months? Well, the breast milk is no longer adequate to provide all the nutrients for the infant, and neither is formula. Also, there are nutrients that we've just talked about, such as omega-3 fats and so forth, iron and zinc, that need to be provided by complementary foods. Also, the infants learn to eat, learn to hold their mouth, learn how to close their mouth around a spoon. So there's lots of developmental things that go on as well. The 6 months, notice I say around, and this is consistent with guidelines, but some kids are ready at 5 months and some are not ready until 6 months. You don't want to wait much longer though, because they are at risk for nutrient deficiency. So what do? You actually look for signs of developmental readiness. They can sit unsupported. Their tongue does not push the food out automatically. This is a link to what's called an extrusion reflex. I'll go ahead and show you this for a moment. I'm going to speed this up, but this is a video of a child. And I'm going to turn this. Yeah, I'm going to leave it. Okay, the infant is not ready to consume food. It enjoys putting the spoon in its mouth, but notice it's leaning back. It's not sitting up. She can't hold her head well. And also, when they start to feed her, you can see that her mouth doesn't work. Like she sticks her tongue out. So they're showing what they're going to give her. And then they give her the food there. No, she's not too crazy about it. That's okay at first. But when they give it to her, they try to scrape it up into her mouth. And then you can see her tongue is kind of going to stick out because she hasn't stopped sticking her tongue out. That's what they use when they breastfeed. She hasn't learned to keep her tongue in when she gets food. So that's called the extrusion reflex when she sort of spits the food out. So that's not what we want to have happen. Okay, so tongue doesn't, so you look for that, and they're not pushing the food out by the extrusion reflex. The baby doesn't gag, and they can chew and swallow, but you can see the baby we just looked at was leaning back, and that's not good either. So you start slowly, just give them a 1 or 2 teaspoons, do it today, do it the next day, do it the next day. But infants really quickly pick up on this, and infants that are ready are raring to go and look at the food and get excited and start squawking if it's not available. So what you want to do is you want to follow their cues for satiety. So you feed them until they're done, and then you stop. We'll talk a little bit more about this. You never try to get more in them. You never try to diet them. You let them eat until they're full. And if they're still hungry after solid foods, then they can go ahead and have their bottle or breast milk. So this gives you an idea. So they start out with purees typically, and then get to lumpy foods. Okay, so here's a quick video. This is my grandson's first food when he had his first carrots. Look at him sitting up. He was totally ready to go. Now, what the dad's doing is waiting to see if he wants it. So he's looking for signs of interest. Now, he interpreted that as he's full. Probably he's just really uncoordinated. But that responsiveness where dad's paying attention, they're facing each other. The baby's sitting in the high chair, he's sitting up straight, he's ready to go, they're making eye contact. That's how that works. Here's another thing to show you. Children can also use what's called a palmar grasp. You can see a picture of it there. And this is a video of Miss Thornton's child. And you can watch her pick up her food in a minute. She can do the whole thing with her palm. So once they can do this, then you can sort of give them some slimy stuff like bananas to eat and whatever that thing is. And you can see she can grab it with her whole hand. And so she's capable of feeding herself. And that becomes a fun thing. She's having a really good time. And there's her sister watching her. This graph right here just puts everything together. And this is intended for you to look things up, but not necessarily to answer questions about them. But having one table that shows the months across the top there, and you can see the timing, and then what types of food, exclusive breastfeeding, as you can see that first row, do up until 6 months, and complementary feeding starts between 4 and 6 months and continues on. Cow milk, not until 12 months. And as we'll talk about, allergy foods as soon as they start consuming foods. And notice this table has 4 months. That's because it is okay to start offering foods to infants around or after 4 months, never before, but after 4 months, if they show all those signs of readiness. Most of them don't. Most of them aren't ready till about 5 or 6 months, but it can happen, and it's certainly not the end of the world. Okay, so that's the end of that lecture. And so I'm going to pull up Complementary Foods Lecture 2. And what I did to facilitate this is studying for your exam is highlight key information. So I'm going to start out showing you some sample menus. This is, I keep showing family pictures. This is a picture of my daughter when she was a little kid. I had no idea I'd be showing this for class. If I had it, I would have kept the napkin off the table. But anyway, so whole foods diet, kids will eat them if you have it available. Now, this is more information than anybody would have. I would never put this on a test. But what I want you to see is the examples. Okay, so here's the meal. This is infants, right? 0 to 5 months and 6 to 11 months. Notice up until 6 months, typically just breast milk or formula. Remember, we talked, there's a little slop in there, but around 6 months is when you start adding complementary foods. So you get some examples here, and I like to point out the fact that we're looking at real food here. Notice this isn't Pop-Tarts or potato chips or Coke or sodas or juice or whatever. This is real food. So some grains, typically this would be fortified with iron and zinc, or meat, fish, poultry. So this is where they're getting some of the minerals, and then cheese to get some calcium, vitamin D potentially from some, depending on the product, and so on. So you can see this gives people an example of what to feed infants and about how much. Here's a similar menu for a 6 to 12-month-old. I just want you to take a look at it now. Mashed bananas, mashed peas, cooked lentils, mashed green beans, mashed sweet potatoes. So many of these foods can be your food. Families can cook the food, put some aside before it's salted, mash it up, and then you're good to go. I highlighted, this is a sample meal pattern with portion sizes. Again, this is for your reference. I won't ask this question to ask you what should be on this, but I wanted you to notice that there's lots of whole foods. I started highlighting. If you look around at all the foods, most of the foods are whole foods. There's a couple convenience things such as cooked pasta, pita bread, and so forth, and that's fine. But there's lots and lots of whole foods as well, or easy to consume foods. So this gives a varied diet, and the kid gets lots of experience with fruits and vegetables, which is really important. So the next issue is how to feed. And this is a term it is on the exam, and I want to talk about this. There is a method of feeding kids called the division of responsibility. And the individual who created this is Ellen Satter. She is a nationally known expert on feeding infants and toddlers. She has and families. She has a website with a great deal of information. If you're ever involved professionally in giving people advice on feeding infants and toddlers, this is a go-to place. I've seen her speak before, and she's very good. What I like about her is she takes the strain away from parents, because mealtime can be a battle. Parents are worried that the kids aren't eating enough, and so they pressure the kids to eat, and then that makes the kid not want to eat, and so it turns into a power struggle, and it's never really a successful endeavor to try to control what somebody else eats. So the division of responsibility is this. The red part is for the caregiver. You take leadership with the what, when, and where of feeding. So you set up the meals, you decide what's going to be there and what time. The child determines how much and whether to eat what you provide. So, and now this is very simple. There's nothing wrong with requiring that children taste new foods. You can do things like that, but it doesn't help to say you must finish all of this in order to get this. Those bargains are so easy to get into, and they just turn into competition, and they create stress for the mealtime. So this calm way of working together applies to every stage of the child's growing up years. Okay, you feed the baby on demand, let him determine how much he wants as he develops, becomes more regular in his eating patterns. You take on responsibility for when and where, and they decide what. So the caregiver's job, this just goes into this a little bit more. You choose and prepare food. The kids need reliability. When are meals? When are snacks? What are the snacks going to be? Typically, that can be fruit. It's important to understand that snacks are not cookies. Snacks are part of the whole foods that fit into their day. Eating time should be pleasant, and you sit together as a family. You show what having a nice dinner time is like. Children respond to this, and can family meals that last throughout the child's lifetime are shown to improve outcomes with respect to decrease obesity, and more, even decrease risk taking from teenagers if they have this center sort of family experiences with the mealtime. Be considerate. If they don't like certain things, you want to have foods that they like, but you don't want to cater to them, so you don't want to make a separate meal. Just make sure that the meals have foods that people can eat, and let them decide what and how much. Don't give foods between snacks and meals so that they're not hungry, because then that doesn't work. And let the child grow the way their body is going to be. So your job is to trust your child to eat what he needs, learn to eat the foods you eat, grow predictably in their way, and learn to behave well at mealtime. So there's a term also called responsive parenting, which is kind of like what we've been describing, which is being responsive to the child. So as infants, they cannot verbalize their feelings. So and you will be feeding a child well before they can talk. So you need to look at them and try to sense what if they're frustrated and understand to the best that you can how they communicate. Some parents even help teach kids sign language, like things like more and so forth. So they work to be responsive to the emotional needs of the child. It aims to identify their signals, emphasizes affection and warmth, and through verbal communication. It's a key dimension to parenting. Here's a table, and I will not ask these questions, but just to give you some examples. A child is hungry, you interpret that hunger, you know how to do it. Predictable feeding response from the caregiver. When they're hungry, here's your food. When they're full, then you let them stop. That's all there is to it. It's a nice environment. The child is seated facing the caregiver, like the video that I showed you before. There's reciprocal communication. You don't stick a kid in a high chair and go do something else. One thing is the choking hazard, but also this is a time for communication. Use appropriate utensils for the kids. I put this together just to kind of have a one-stop place to talk about this. They're learning to self-feed. They're going to be messy. It's not their fault. But what you want to do is you want to model healthful eating and have several items, but don't make something else. So don't say, okay, you don't like this, you can have a bowl of cereal, because once you start that, that's what's going to happen. Chat during meals, tell the child what you're doing. Oh, I'm cutting up this, I'm getting this for you. Let the child eat until they're full. Don't bribe them, don't fight. There are places for snack foods in the home for treats. One way to do this is to have treats on weekends, or say on Friday night we have ice cream and movie night and so forth. So you can have treats be part of the normal world after the kids are 2, but not something that they have to, in order to get, they have to eat something else for that, if that makes any sense. Don't put on the TV. In contrast, this is what you don't do. Non-responsive parenting is just kind of the opposite of that. You're trying to control them. You make them try to eat when they're full, try to interfere with their growing autonomy. And this actually leads to a poor diet quality and in some kids risk for obesity. So, and sometimes, sometimes parent caregivers can ignore the child and become uninvolved, and that doesn't work either. So also, we don't want to soothe with food. This is a rough one. People or many people grew up with this, but because we have such a problem with obesity in this country and with the health of children of our nation, it's not time to give in to soothing with food. Now, there's 2 typical ways of introducing complementary foods. One is a traditional way, and you can see this baby's sitting up, looking fine, got a puree. This is a spoon with some mashed up peas or carrots or something. This is the traditional way. There is a movement that's been going on for several years now called baby-led weaning, where instead of purees, parents just stick the kid in a high chair and hand them some mushy broccoli and go to town. And there have been several studies to see how these compare. There's a little bit less iron consumption in this group, but they might end up being okay. There's nothing wrong with starting with purees till 2 or 3 months in. And so maybe when the child's 8 or 9 months, then you start giving them stuff to get with their hands. This way you can help them learn to eat, put their mouth around the spoon, and also provide good sources of iron. So this is a way to make sure they're actually consuming the iron. People give iron-rich foods to babies a lot of times, and they never spoon feed them. Sometimes they don't get that much of it in their mouths. So I'm not against this, but a combination of these is probably the easiest way to go. A couple more points here. We need to be careful about food safety. And so we'll talk about illness and we'll talk about choking. There's more information here than you probably need because you've had food systems and food science and you understand how to take care of food. But there's a few things to consider with feeding infants. No unpasteurized juice, milk, or dairy, and no undercooked items. Okay, you don't want to start that. You sure don't want to give a child a bacterial condition. Wash your hands, pay attention to poultry, use proper temperatures, use the 2-hour rule, and so forth. One that you may or may not know is to never give honey to an infant less than 1 year of age due to risk for botulism. Okay, there are spores in honey, and an infant consuming even cooked honey, but raw or cooked honey, the spores may actually sporulate in the GI tract and produce the botulism toxin. So honey is a no-no up until age 1. Keep things in the refrigerator. When you're feeding food, let's say you have a new jar, or you made one and you bought it, a new jar of carrot puree. What you want to do is you want to take a portion out and put it in a little serving dish and feed the baby from that. That way, if they don't eat the rest of it, you can save it in the refrigerator. But once you have dipped a spoon in something and put it in a child's mouth, then it's contaminated. So they can finish their meal, but then you have to throw the rest of it away. Always throw away any leftover formula or breast milk. Remember, that's a safety hazard. With respect to choking, things that are round that can, the size of a walnut or smaller that can fit into the throat can be choking hazards. The very small things can do it too. So the small and round are slippery. Okay. So first of all, put the child in a high chair, secure to a seat, belt them in, sit there with them, supervise them the entire time. If you're giving items like this, some items are inappropriate for kids. You can feed grapes to children, but they need to be cut into halves or quarters. Some grapes are huge. They're just the right choking size. Nuts should wait until about 4 and they can really chew. Peanuts, same thing. Popcorn is a choking hazard. Hard candy is wrong for a variety of reasons, but certainly a choking hazard. Carrots, it seems like fun to give a kid a large carrot, but they can bite off a piece and choke on it, so that's not okay. Hot dogs, same thing, texture, meatballs. Some puffs, they have trouble getting down, in gum. So these are inappropriate. And if you want to serve something like grapes or blueberries, for example, you can cut them in half or in quarters before serving. So it works. And also have the child sit down and not walk around and eat. And finally, if you give them fish, make sure the bones are gone. Okay, so what do we need to worry about? There's several things, but we've already talked about iron deficiency, anemia, and basic nutrition. There's a couple of issues that can sometimes affect toddlers. One is the risk for dental caries. And so 1 in 5 children have this trouble. What I wanted to emphasize here is something called baby bottle tooth decay. Some people have been known to put their baby to bed feeding formula or even breast milk, and it pools around in their mouth, and if it pools in it, it can stay around their teeth while they sleep. That is unfortunately the perfect storm for causing this type of decay. So it's not a good idea to feed a bottle to a kid and then put them down with a bottle, or even have them go to sleep with it in their mouth. It's better to feed them, play with them a little bit, and then put them down. As soon as they get a tooth, brush it. Okay, they see you do it, so you can sing little songs to them, but they need to know that they brush their teeth their entire life. And crunchy foods can be helpful compared to stuff that sticks to the teeth. White bread and things like that stick to the teeth. Lots of high carb foods will stick to the teeth and cause problems as well. They need fluoride. If they're getting well watered, it should be tested. So you don't want fluorosis, you don't want excess, but also there needs to be enough, because enough fluoride helps with the tooth formation and strength. Okay, the last point here has to do with GI issues. Some toddlers especially when they start, infants, when they start consuming food, sometimes they have trouble and they immediately become constipated. And so it's a chore for parents to be sure they get food, make sure they learn to consume water, make sure they get enough water. Some kids won't drink the water, so got to work on that. Sometimes this is when juice gets introduced if kids just can't go, and sometimes this happens. There's actually a medication called Miralax that can be used for infants. There's a dose for infants. It's not on the container, but you would go to, I found this on PubMed and then also on pediatrician websites, but you add a little bit to a juice. And what Miralax does is it's a laxative that doesn't cause laxation or pain. All it does is pull in moisture. So if the stools are hard, it makes them softer. Doesn't stimulate or anything like that, but it can help. Some kids get such hard stools they can't get it out, and then they start crying because it hurts so bad, and then they hold it because it hurts so bad, and then you get in just a really bad cycle of pain. And it's very, very distressing. So this is one of those potential solutions. You want to go the whole foods route first, This is sometimes when healthcare providers and dietitians can really be helpful. The other end of the spectrum, some kids have diarrhea. Excess juice intake can be a problem with that. And so they shouldn't be consuming juice in the first place. If they are consuming some, dilute it after the age of 1. If you're going to give it to them, dilute it. But for example, apple juice is apple juice is kind of high in fructose, and it can pull in water and cause diarrhea too if kids are given a lot of that. Some kids have celiac disease. The incidence is low, and this is not really the topic of this class, but it's good to understand if a child has consistent diarrhea, there may be a medical cause for it. Okay, so that's all the information that will be covered on the exam. And you will have your exam on next Thursday as recommended, or as scheduled. Sorry.